What's up, friends? Welcome back to the Shaw Local Bears Insider Podcast. We are back. I'm Sean Hammond, Shaw Local Bears beat reporter. He's Michael Dwojak joining me as he always does, Shaw Local's very own. Michael, we got big news, of course. Ben Johnson is coming to Chicago. The Bears have reportedly hired Ben Johnson. They're as of Tuesday morning, the team has not confirmed it, but it sounds like they're hashing out the details of the contract probably as we speak. Michael, obviously they swung big. This is the big splashy hire. This is the guy you wanted all along. I think this is where a lot of Bears fans felt like this was going. But Michael, what are your thoughts here as we got the news yesterday on Monday?
Well, I think my first thoughts are that, our listeners are going to think that we're liars because I think the last time we talked to them, we said, like, buckle up. This is going to take a while.
Yeah.
But I don't think you and I expected the Lions to lose this weekend to the Commanders like a lot of people did. And that just really changed the landscape of what this coaching search is going to look like, right? As soon as Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn became available, everyone was ready to go. Everyone was moving. And I think that's the biggest thing where I think the Bears – for how much, slack we give them throughout the year, obviously of the disappointment about how they run things, about press conferences, side conferences, all that kind of stuff. I do think you need to give the Bears credit for how swiftly they acted, right? Like as soon as the Lions lost on Saturday night, they already got their interview scheduled for Eddie George. And obviously, the Rooney Rule and, all that type of stuff. Like we don't really need to get into it, but it does feel weird and it's not great and that kind of stuff. And that's a different issue, but they were ready to get their second external interview going. And they were prepared. They got that done and they were ready to move. And I think that's a lot of credit to, whether that's Ryan Poles, whether that's the Kevin Warren effect, whether that's, George McCaskey obviously being willing to, pay a lot of money because you would imagine that Ben Johnson is getting a hefty payday. This was a really good, cohesive plan by the Bears that they executed perfectly. And I think they deserve credit for that because in the past, we could have seen them bundled. We could have seen them say, well, maybe we should go for the more experienced guy. I don't know if I want to risk it. This whole group kind of came together, came prepared with an action, and they got it done very quickly.
The way this came together so quickly on Monday tells you that after that first round of interviews, the Bears were very clear that Ben Johnson was their guy. Ryan Poles was very clear. Kevin Warren, I'm sure, was very clear. He was saying all along that it would be obvious. Kevin Warren was saying that. And it appears that is the case, that Ben Johnson was the obvious choice for them. And, kudos to them for moving quickly because there's been all these rumors about the Raiders and Tom Brady and Ben Johnson. Did they fire their GM so that they could get Ben Johnson's guy, whoever that would be, to help him run that organization? Was Tom Brady, going to be given a little, getting those extra conversations with his duties on Fox, before the game over the weekend? How much was his influence going to play a factor in all this? The Bears did not let Ben Johnson go anywhere near Las Vegas. They did not let him go anywhere near Jacksonville. They said, this is our guy. We don't need to do a second round of interviews because the second round would have started this week. The only second interview they needed, and in fact, they didn't even really the second interview with Ben Johnson is flying him into the building and saying, we want you. And so you got to give the Bears kudos for acting quickly and having some conviction. We'll find out 3-4 years down the line if this was a good move or not. But at this point in time, you have to give them credit for following those convictions.
And the Bears made the obvious move here, right? Like they the last 2 years have made the obvious move. And I know there's a lot of conversation about, critiquing Ryan Poles and whether he should have, met with Jaden Daniels, obviously with the Commanders doing so well and, all of that stuff. And that's obviously a different conversation. But for the past 2 off seasons, it's been pretty clear what the Bears need to do. They need to draft Caleb Williams with the number 1 overall draft pick. And this off season, they needed to hire Ben Johnson like the top candidate. And so, whether this works out, I can't guarantee you that it's going to work out perfectly, that the Bears are going to win a bunch of Super Bowls. Maybe it doesn't end up working, but it seems like the process that the Bears underwent worked, right? Like obviously they got a lot of flack for all the candidates, and maybe they always knew they wanted to get Ben Johnson, and they were just like, well, we have to wait until he's available and when the Lions lose. So let's just talk to a bunch of people and figure out what is going so wrong with our team and what they're noticing about us. So maybe that was part of the plan, and we'll obviously talk to Ryan Poles, I assume, sometime this week, and obviously without, I'm sure that'll be a question, but. At the end of the day, they made the right hire, or they made what everyone agrees is the right hire.
Yeah.
And now it's up to putting Ben Johnson, letting him get his full staff, building a roster that he can kind of use to succeed. Because he's very talented play caller. He can do a lot of great things, but that offensive line needs to get better. That defensive line needs to be better. He needs to have his coaches in there. So there's still a lot of work to be done, but this is a really good first step, at least.
Yeah, there's a lot of work to be done, including, of course, finalizing that contract. The Bears, like I said at the top, they have not announced anything, so we can assume that we're still waiting for that. I see some thoughts, some comments in the chat. When is the press conference? Yeah, we don't know any of that, so that's still all up in the air. Any of the reported coaches that he's looking to bring along, I know Dennis Allen's name was out there as defensive coordinator. He is the former Saints coach. The longtime Saints defensive coordinator under Sean Payton. I think it was 7 seasons. They have been linked together, but none of that is official yet. We're still going to have to wait and see, as this sort of pulls together. If you're joining us here live on YouTube, do us a favor and hit the thumbs up. That's a really great way to support the show. If you're listening after the fact on Apple or Spotify, leave us a review. We would really appreciate a 5-star review, and keep an eye on our Twitter pages. I'm at Sean_Hammond. He is at Dwojak94. We will let you know when we're going to go live. We will give you guys a heads up so that you can prepare and come join us live on YouTube. You can see our lovely faces. You can join the chat. You can get your Bears questions in. I do want to get to some of the thoughts and comments and questions in the chat as soon as we can here. But Michael, like you said, Ben Johnson, obviously there's a lot of work to be done. Dennis Allen has been linked to him. I think the one thing that obviously stands out when you're looking at Ben Johnson's options across the league is the quarterback, is Caleb Williams, is I know the Jaguars have Trevor Lawrence, and there's maybe some questions about where the GM over there fits in, and whether or not Trent Baalke would be a guy that Ben Johnson wanted to work for. It seems pretty clear that the Bears were number one on Ben Johnson's list as much as he was number one on theirs.
And it's become clear, like we, heading into this offseason and during the offseason, we talked about, like, is this job the number one job, right? Mm-hmm. And obviously, we don't know what things look a little bit differently if the New England job was open, if they weren't enamored in Mike Vrabel. Maybe, like, obviously Drake May is a great quarterback too, and you got a lot of good things and a lot of cap space for New England and good draft picks as well. But I think Ben Johnson kind of made it clear that, this is the best situation, right, that you want to land in. Like, Las Vegas, yeah, they have Tom Brady, but they don't have a quarterback, and that seems like a project that's going to take a couple years. The Jaguars, obviously, they have Trevor Lawrence, but it just seems like maybe it's not the right atmosphere, especially with the general manager kind of sticking around despite lack of success. So I think Ben Johnson kind of told you that he believes in what the Bears have, and I think he kind of told you that he believes in Caleb Williams, right? Like, yeah. I think that's a big reinforcement where he's been picky about where he wants to go. Last year, he could have gone to the Commanders or the Seahawks. He chose to stay in Detroit. He got some interviews early a couple of years ago as well. And this year, he decided to go to the Bears because of a lot of different things. But I think Caleb Williams is that number one thing where he has the talent that's untapped right now, right? Like, you saw Caleb do a lot of great impressive performance, like a lot of great things this year, but then you also saw him make some mistakes and, try to keep plays alive. And that's something that Ben Johnson's going to work with. But I think that the biggest thing is that he sees the potential in Caleb, like we've all kind of seen the potential in him. And if you're going to make the jump to be your first time head coach, you want to succeed and obviously stay somewhere for a long time. And it really seemed like he was like, this is a great landing spot. We'll work on the offensive line. I'm sure we'll work on the defensive line, some shifting here and there. But I have my future quarterback for at least the next 4 years, and I can really build something here. And I think that's the biggest thing that kind of drew Ben Johnson to Chicago.
Yeah, this is a guy who took Jared Goff after a 3-win season. And most people at that point were kind of thinking that this Jared Goff thing, is only going to have so much longer.
Right.
And Ben Johnson, turned that into the best offense in football. And Jared Goff has played at an exceptionally high level. I know he played bad in that game against Washington. I know he still has his moments, of course. But I think when you look at what Caleb Williams was able to do his rookie season, despite all the craziness and turmoil around him, despite the offensive line being, obviously not what Bears fans hoped it was going into the season. All in all, Caleb had about as good as a rookie season as you can, given that situation that he was in. And I think that you can be pretty optimistic that you get Ben Johnson in there, you get the right pieces, you get him building that offense how he wants it. I really do think that this could be a pairing that could be really beneficial for this offense moving forward.
And obviously, we've talked a lot about, this, he didn't deliberately say it, but it felt like this was Caleb's number one choice, right? Like based on the comments, like at the end of the season press conference, he was asked about Ben Johnson, and he talked about how impressed he was just watching their games, whether it was on TV, like after they finished their regular season game, or whether it was, when they were playing the Lions, like he would watch what they're doing and how they're like quickly adapting to what their defense was doing and that sort of stuff. So, and he talked on the St. Brown podcast about how much he liked, the Lions OC and what Ben Johnson is doing there. So, I think this is just feels like the perfect, marriage. Obviously we still need to see how it's going to develop and, how these two kind of get along. But I think you didn't put Caleb in the right spot in the first year. You gave him you gave him 2 play callers, 3 OCs, a coaching change, an offensive line that didn't succeed. Like, you did not put him in a good position to succeed as much as the Commanders did, obviously, with Jaden Daniels. And look what's happening with that. But I do think now you've found a coach that is going to help, develop Caleb, put him in a good spot. And I think that's a good thing. Would you have liked this maybe a year ago? Sure. Obviously, it seemed like based on reports that he was interested in the Bears job if it became open. And you kind of wonder, well, did we really need to wait a year to do this? And is there some damage to Caleb after that first year? Maybe, who knows? But at this point, you are paired together and you do have a good cohesive thing going here. And I'm really excited to see what that means, especially, even just like mini camps and that sort of stuff. Just, what is that going to look like and how quickly are they connecting to build a really strong rapport?
Ben Johnson talked about it during his media session last week, and I really do think that he means it when he says like he's going to be a better head coach for having waited that year. Obviously the Commanders were really interested in him. There were the reports that that they were on their way to Detroit to interview him in person when he told them he was pulling out of the running. And I know there was clearly some emotions involved in that. That was right after the Lions lost in the NFC Championship game. But you do wonder. I do think that he has benefited from that. He spent the whole summer talking or thinking about what a franchise would look like with him as the head coach, and that is I think more valuable than maybe people would think. How many of these coaches like jump at their first chance to be a head coach? Right. I know Ben was clearly in a very favorable situation. Not many guys are as talked about as popular candidates as he has been this last year, looking back towards last year too. So obviously he was in a pretty favorable position where he could do that. But I don't think that every coach out there would make the same move necessarily if they had a chance to be a head coach. You're talking about millions of dollars. The reports last year were that Ben possibly wanted up to like $15 million a year. And obviously we don't have that confirmed. We don't know what the Bears are going to be paying him, but it's going to be a lot. Like they talked about, Kevin Warren said, there will be no obstacles. And you read between the lines, that means money.
Yeah, it definitely does mean money. And that, again, it goes to credence of, giving, the McCaskies credit, giving the Kevin Warren credit about running the search much better than they did. Obviously, last week we talked about the private jet, picking up McCarthy and that kind of stuff. I know people were on, they were on jet alert yesterday, trying to figure out whether that was Ben Johnson going from Pontiac to Wheeling, which obviously wasn't. But it just kind of shows about how different they're doing it, and how it also kind of says, I feel like, kind of what it seems like Ben Johnson probably put together a very, good plan for this team, right? It seems like he learned a lot over those couple of years, like he said, those experiences. He kind of thought more about how he wants what he wants to do as a head coach. And I think that just must have been like what you mentioned at the top about how they just wanted to be blown away. And it's very clear that they were blown away, because you could very easily see the Bears being like, well, we want to do a second round and we want to give everyone a fair chance. And instead they were just like, this guy has the perfect plan. Like, he knows how he's going to develop Caleb. I'm sure he knows how he's going to build or help build the roster. He has a lot of great, plans about how he's going to hold people accountable. And that just comes from experience and kind of thinking about it more than it maybe did 2 or even 1 year ago. So, obviously, he's developed as a coach, both offensively, but he's also thought about it much more than he did in the past. And that's very clear that's probably one of the main reasons why the McCaskies and the Bears thought it would be great to just bring him in right away instead of just pulling this thing on.
And, just an interesting thought on that too. I mean, if the Lions win over the weekend, if they beat the Commanders and they're still playing, you can't interview Ben Johnson this week.
Right.
And so if that's the case and he is your guy, you're not going to sit around for a week and do nothing. You're going to interview some of those other candidates. So I think that's another reason why this net was cast so wide. Like maybe it became apparent that Ben Johnson was the guy, but if he wasn't going to be available this week, you still got to do your due diligence on some of these other guys. You still got to hold some second interviews. Obviously, that's an alternative universe. That didn't happen. The Lions lost. He became available on Monday.
Right.
And obviously, it seems like this was the choice for both sides.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting. You just kind of listen a lot of these NFL insiders talking about it, and it's become very clear that everyone is shocked that the Bears did this, which is kind of funny, but also like, I mean, I was kind of surprised, when we got the notification. I think Tom Pelissero was the first one to report it, but I was like being like, well, do we like need to tail this, plane, like figure out like go to Wheeling or whatever, and then you just get the breaking news, and it's just it is kind of shocking that they were able to get this done, because they just haven't done this in the past, right? Like they just haven't. They've had coaches reportedly be in coach and like in the middle seat and that kind of stuff. Like they haven't run that. And maybe this is kudos to Kevin Warren, where yes, he obviously, we gave him a hard time about the 8-minute monologue to start the press conference after Eberflus was fired. But at the end of the day, maybe he is running this organization much better and kind of helping them reach the 21st century as opposed to what they were doing in the past. And we'll obviously ask questions about that, the process, what was it like, and all that kind of stuff whenever the press conference happens. But it is just kind of interesting just listening to all these different people be like, wow, the Bears actually like did the right thing. Like they hired the guy. And it'll be interesting to see how much does that kind of continue with the coaching, staff, and how much does that kind of continue with, the roster construction.
You're saying the Bears acted like a $6 billion NFL franchise, yes. Michael. Yeah. Yes. You don't think George McCaskey picked him up from baggage claim?
I mean, it appears not. Well, we'll see. He could be in the air right now. There's still a chance that McCaskey could pick him up at O'Hare and be like, listen, like, this is what we've always done. This is a tradition with the Bears. Like, I always pick you guys up. I'm going to park on the Bulls lot in O'Hare's parking lot, and we're going to walk over, and I'm going to have a sign, and I'm going to pick you up. No, I mean, it's just interesting, right? It's just how different it all is. And I think we were kind of surprised by it because we haven't seen it with the stadium or anything like that. So it's interesting to see that they were able to do it this way.
This franchise doesn't really operate with speed, and it hasn't really under Kevin Warren either. Like the decision to fire Eberflus, Warren likes to sleep on it, likes to think about it, mull it over. I threw this comment from Rick up on the screen here. Who would have thought that the McCaskies were picked before Tom Brady? That's, that it's funny. It's jokey, but it's serious at the same time. I do think that I said this on Friday, and, I still feel this way. Like, Tom Brady is like the new shiny object for the Raiders right now. He owns like 5% of the team or whatever it is. Obviously he's done, he was very successful as a player, and he has thoughts on how it should be done. But that's still the Raiders. They still don't have a quarterback. They're, the roster's in shambles. I really do think that the quarterback played a big part in this. And, Tom Brady coming in and owning a small part of the team isn't necessarily going to change the trajectory of the Las Vegas Raiders. Obviously, he believes he can be a big part of that. Otherwise, he wouldn't be so involved in all this stuff. But, we got to see the results there. Like this is still a new partnership right now with Tom Brady and the Raiders.
And it would have taken like a leap of faith, right? Like you would have to believe that Tom Brady could do this, where he hasn't done it, right? Like he's like done it, and we've seen in the past in so many different sports where, these great athletes just can't do it anywhere else. Whether it's, it's Michael Jordan being the owner of the Hornets,
never won.
They were terrible. He was a terrible GM. Obviously, the greatest player of all time, but he was a terrible GM and terrible owner. And like you've kind of seen that too. Like just because Tom Brady was great at football, I know people have kind of been like, well, he's an okay announcer, and like from what I've heard, he's like fine. I don't think I don't want to get into the whole Greg Olson Tom Brady thing, but at the end of the day, Ben Johnson would have needed to do a leap of faith that he was going to believe that Tom Brady knew what he was doing when he's never done it before. The Raiders weren't in a position to get a quarterback this year. Anyone you were going to bring in was probably going to be a project guy or, some guy, a retread guy, who's kind of done it before, but hasn't done it at the highest level. Maybe they would be in on Sam Darnold. But like, there's so many ifs, right, with the Raiders job where you come to Chicago and you're like, Caleb Williams is your quarterback for at least the next 4 years. You have a lot of draft picks. You have a bunch of cap space. This seems like a pretty good foundation. You just got to adjust it. And so, yeah, I agree with you. Like Tom Brady's the shiny object. Obviously, maybe it'll work in the next few years, and he is able to help, Mark Davis build something great there. But if I'm staking my first and maybe only chance of being a head coach, I'm choosing the potential with the talent that the Bears already have in place.
Yeah, and it obviously the roster has a ways to go in certain areas. Like they're going to have to fix some things. The Lions, when they started their rebuild in the trenches, and I know that obviously they drafted a lot of wide receivers and a running back and all that stuff, but obviously this Bears team has some issues to fix in the trenches, and I think Ben Johnson is well aware of that, and he knows that you can't just slap another wide receiver on this thing and make it work. Like there's bigger issues there. You look at sort of the staff potentially that he could bring in. We mentioned Dennis Allen. Sounds like he's the likely candidate to be the defensive coordinator. Darren Rizzi has been linked to them as potentially the special teams coordinator, assuming he does not land a head coaching job. Rizzi was the guy who took over for Dennis Allen with the Saints when Allen was fired in November. And just kind of perusing the Detroit Lions coaching staff. I mean, when a coordinator leaves, they will typically take one or two assistants. It's not. It's kind of rare. Like when Matt Eberflus left the Colts decided they were going to do a complete staff change on the defensive side of the ball. So all those guys were available. I wouldn't expect Ben Johnson to bring maybe more than one or two of his guys with him from Detroit. And you look at the names, and I think one name that really stands out is Hank Fraley, the offensive line coach. Could he potentially be an offensive coordinator possibility there? And obviously he knows how to build things in the trenches. The Lions have maybe the best offensive line in football, or at least one of. He's definitely a name to keep an eye on. Tanner Engstrand was their passing game coordinator. He's another name to keep an eye on. And obviously those guys will have to be weighing, the Lions are going to hire an offensive coordinator. They're going to likely promote somebody. So maybe those guys are going to stick around in Detroit. We don't really know yet.
No, and for how much we have given the Bears credit about being prepared, it seems like Ben Johnson seems pretty prepared. Like as soon as it was reported that they've come to like an agreement on terms, I think the next couple tweets were, Dennis Allen is considered to be a very heavy candidate, obviously, and you've seen the Rizzi, and then I saw that Brad Biggs from the Tribune mentioned that maybe they would keep Hightower. Rizzi went somewhere, but. I think if you can get Dennis Allen to be your DC, I think that would be a perfect fit. You've got someone who's been a head coach twice already,
Yep.
and you've got someone who's shown that he's a really good defensive coordinator. So you got someone who can run the defense. I think they also run a 4-3 defense, so that would be good. You would kind of keep the same, you would change things up defensively, but you wouldn't need to do a major overhaul defensively with who you have. But you've got someone who can maybe provide some leadership for Ben Johnson and can kind of be like, hey, like, this is how I ran things. Like, this is what I kind of learned doing this a couple of times. Maybe it's beneficial for you to do it this way or something like that. So it's great to have someone there who's going to be able to help you like that. And quite honestly, someone who is probably not going to be, considered for a third head coaching job, right? No disrespect to him, but
that's a good point.
Like, no disrespect to Dennis Allen, but it just seems like it hasn't worked the 2 times he's gotten it. And, some guys are just good at being coordinators. And maybe that's great where you have your defensive coordinator for the next 5, 6, 7 years, and you're just able to be, successful in that motion. So that when I saw that name, I was really excited because that just says that you're ready to go and you would have someone good. And like you mentioned, I mean, if you're bringing anyone, you're bringing Hank Fraley. He developed that offensive line. He is able to identify offensive linemen, something that, Ryan Poles and Ian Cunningham haven't really been able to do since they've taken over. So it'll be great if you can just, upgrade him to an OC, give him a higher position so you can make the hire. I guess it just depends on what Fraley wants to do and whether the Lions are like, no, we're just going to upgrade him and we're just going to keep him within and he's going to be our OC.
Yeah, I mean, if the Lions want to keep him, I'm sure that they would pay up and make that happen. And also, I mean, if you're a coordinator candidate, you probably still would rather be the Lions OC than the Bears, given where that team is right now, the roster that's built. I mean, they expect to compete for the Super Bowl. That's a really interesting point on Dennis Allen. Like, your head coach can lean on him, and B, like, very few NFL coaches get 3 shots at being a head coach. I don't think anything on Dennis Allen's resume really stands out that says this guy's going to get a 3rd shot. Presumably, if things go well, like, you're gonna have him around for the long haul. And you're right. Like, he's traditionally run a 4-3 scheme. That's exactly what the Bears ran under Matt Eberflus. At least the base defense, they're built for that. Like, this defense can run exactly what Dennis Allen is going to want to run from day one. And I know that you got some areas to improve. You still need to find another edge rusher who can really be a difference maker.
Yeah.
But you like what you got in the secondary. The linebackers should, you would think, fit that scheme pretty well, at least what depending on how similar it is to what Matt Eberflus liked running. I would think that this defense could take some really nice steps. We thought that they were playing well that first half of the season. Obviously, it really kind of fell apart with everything else that fell apart during the second half of last year. But I still do think they have a lot of really nice pieces, and with the right head coach, the right scheme, that these guys could still play at a really high level.
And if they have a functioning offense, right? Like, I think, you and I, like, I know we're planning on doing a podcast later, and whether it's the next couple of weeks, depending on how the rest of the coaching search, like, obviously just kind of talking about what happened this past season. But, like, that Bears defense was able to hang around for the first half of the season. But after a while, when the offense just continued to go 3 and out and just wasn't successful, like, at some point you need help, right? Like, you can't do it all by yourself, and you can't be expected to do the best. And obviously, that defense lost, a couple of key players. Obviously, Jaquan Brisker, Billings was out. They never really found anyone opposite of Sweat. But I would agree with you. If you bring Dennis Allen, you bring in someone else, whether you draft him or you bring him as a free agent, someone else who can play opposite of Montez Sweat. You have a defense that is still very talented with a lot of young, talented players. And Dennis Allen can definitely do, he can coach them up. So I would definitely agree that you are in a pretty good position to succeed if you bring in a coach like that, especially if Ben Johnson can get that offense going.
Yeah, absolutely. I do want to touch on this, Michael. We got a few more minutes here before we got to run, but are there any concerns that Ben Johnson has never been a head coach before? I know that we're excited about the offense. We're excited about what he can do for the quarterback. We're generally, I think our vibes this morning are this is a good move for the Bears. But is there any concern that much like Matt Nagy, much like Matt Eberflus, Ben Johnson's never been a head coach before?
I mean, sure, there's always concern, right? Like he's never done it before. You don't know how he's going to do it now, right? Like it's very. He even himself admitted he talked about how before he never really thought about what it would entail being a head. Like I'm sure he's thought about it, but like fully entail what it means to be a head coach. Like taking care of all the different things, addressing the full team. Like you're not just talking to the offense. You're not just sitting in your office worrying about offensive play calls and like scheming up cool trick plays. Like you're worried about like the entire team. Is the defense functioning well? What is the schedule looking at? Like how's the conditioning looking? Like that is all your responsibility and under your purview. So I think the answer is we don't know, right? Like we don't know how he's going to be a leader in front of the whole room and how much he's going to be able to keep the entire team accountable. But I think everything that you've kind of heard about him from different reporters is that he is hard nosed. Like he's going to hold you accountable. He's going to make sure that you're reaching the same sort of excellence or the standard of excellence that he kind of has. So it'll be interesting to see, like, obviously, we'll talk to him and we'll hear from what he has to say about what his plans are, how he plans to build this thing up. We'll see if he has a hits principle. That's obviously a major key. When you're taking over a team, you have to have some sort of like acronym to make sure your team is all in together. But kidding aside, we don't know the answer, but that's what we're going to figure out, and it's going to be really interesting to see. A lot of it will be his support system, right? Like, does he surround himself, and is he able to surround himself with a really strong support system to kind of help him succeed? So we don't know the answer. We're obviously going to see, but it'll be really interesting to see because, Sean McVay didn't have experience before, right? Like, Shanahan didn't have experience before. Kevin O'Connell didn't have experience before. There have been plenty of guys who haven't had experience before and who have faltered and haven't done well, but there are also a bunch who have and have obviously succeeded at a high level. So it just depends on if the Bears are able to put him in a good position to succeed. And only time will tell at this point whether that's going to be the case. You obviously see, big primetime candidates for his coaching staff to start things off, which is good, but you got to see what the next few months are going to look like as we head into mini camp and the training camp and all that stuff.
I think Bears fans would be thrilled if they have their Kevin O'Connell, if they have their Sean McVay. Obviously, McVay is a really high bar. He's won a Super Bowl. If they have their Kyle Shanahan, they're going to be really, really happy with that because that means that you're competing every single year. And the thing with Ben Johnson, too, is like, look, this is a guy who walked on at UNC, 20 years ago. He was a math and computer science major. I think this dude's wicked smart. I think he's, if anybody is going to have a good understanding of late game situations and playing the odds, obviously the Lions love to go for it on fourth down. You wonder how much Ben Johnson's influence affected that. I do think that he's going to have that stuff figured out, I think, or at least a lot better than the last head coach, because that was clearly the number one downfall with the Matt Eberflus era was those end of game situations. They were just not good enough. No matter how good your defense is, it didn't matter. And so I think that I would be optimistic if I was a Bears fan that Ben Johnson is going to have those things figured out. We got a comment in here wondering where all the McCarthy fans went. Thanks for joining the show, Thomas. Any other last comments? Throw them in the chat here. Let's see. Rick says that Caleb can be the best quarterback in the division next year, he says. Michael, thoughts on that?
I think
optimistic.
we're very optimistic. I don't think that's a terrible take, I guess. I mean, yeah, I'm interested to see what Jared Goff looks like without obviously Ben Johnson. We don't know what the situation at the Vikings is going to be, whether they're going to bring back Sam Darnold, whether it's going to be J.J. McCarthy, whether it's going to be Daniel Jones, maybe. And Jordan Love, he's been good, but obviously we've seen him falter a little bit in the playoffs, and that's kind of interesting. So I don't know if I'm ready to jump on that bandwagon exactly just yet, but I could see it happening. I think the biggest thing, to kind of wrap things up here is, I think outside of Caleb, Ben Johnson saw that you had a lot of talent here. You got DJ Moore, you got Rome Odunze, you got DeAndre Swift, you have Cole Kmet on this team that apparently the Bears forgot this past year. And I think the biggest thing is, yes, he's going to bring a lot out of Caleb and obviously help him develop. but he's going to find ways to get DJ into space. He's going to find ways to create, one-on-one matchups for Roma Dunze so he can shine on the deep ball, right? Like he's going to, it depends on who he brings in for his offensive line and how they're able to develop that. But DeAndre Swift is a talented player, and you didn't see that for much of the season because, he didn't really get too many gaps or openings. So, for how much, I think a lot of Bears fans are excited for, what Ben Johnson means for Caleb Williams. I think, Bears fans should be excited for what it means for DJ Moore, for all these other top playmakers, because the Bears invested heavily in these toys and they just weren't used at all last season. So I think it's really exciting to see, start thinking about what he could potentially do with all these different playmakers that they have offensively.
Think of what Ben Johnson has done for Amon-Ra St. Brown and for Jameson Williams and those guys. I mean, I was thinking about this morning too. Like those guys are going to benefit as much, if not more, than the quarterback if they can get this thing rolling. That is going to really elevate things for the offense. We saw that. I mean, they just couldn't get DJ the ball. Like he was in his yards per target were like exceptionally low. It was all these short, quick screen passes and lining them up in the backfield. Like, yeah, you can do that sometimes. Obviously, we know from watching the game over the weekend that Ben Johnson's not afraid to use some tricks and some weird things sometimes. Maybe every once in a while to his detriment. But I think he will really help the bread and butter plays too, like getting DJ Moore open down the field. That has to be a priority for this offense moving forward. That is a really interesting point. And yeah, he's coached DeAndre Swift. DeAndre's last year in Detroit was Ben Johnson's first year as a coordinator. Now they traded him a year later. I don't know what that means. Read into that if you want. But obviously he's aware of what DeAndre's strengths and weaknesses are and how best to use him if the Bears are going to stick with DeAndre this season. Let's see. Comment here from Adam Leonard. He says, I like the swing from the owners. If it doesn't pay off, it is what it is. And yeah, that's really, I think, where Bears fans should be, where their heads should be at. Like this is, you swung for the fences. If it doesn't work, like you, much like I think you can't have that revisionist history. You can't. Caleb Williams was the obvious choice for number 1 overall pick last year. You can't change that after one season. You can't look at this and say, well, Jaden Daniels is better. Remember all the turmoil that Caleb Williams had to deal with. I think that debate could look different a year from now. I'm not saying it will. I think it could. And I think with the head coach too, like this is, you're swinging for the fences here. I think everybody is optimistic that this thing's going to work out. Let's let it play out and let's see how it goes. If it doesn't work out, you can at least know that like your team did all that it could to get the number 1 best hire on the market.
And they made the obvious choice, right? Like it's kind of what I talked about earlier, where it's like you did what you were supposed to do. Like whether that works out, it's hard to tell. If it doesn't work out in 4 or 5 years, you look at the process maybe, and you're kind of like, well, did we set him up for success? Did we set up Caleb for success? That's obviously being a pessimist, but they made the obvious move here. They made the big swing, and I think that's all you can give them credit for. They did the same thing with Caleb Williams, and now I don't think anyone will critique the hirings or hiring Ben Johnson or drafting Caleb Williams. I think the biggest critique from now will be, did the Bears put him in a place to succeed? And that's the biggest question we're going to see right now, right? Like, do you get the right coaches? Are you spending enough money? Are you making the right trades? Are you getting the right players around them, right? Like you can make the obvious hire. You can take a big swing, but you can't stop there. And I think that's the biggest thing you need to take from this, where yes, it's fun that they got Ben Johnson. Yes, it's great that they drafted Caleb Williams last year, but that doesn't mean that you're going to succeed and that you need to stop or you're done, that the work is done. And I know that they're obviously committed. It seems like they're committed with bringing in a good defensive staff, bringing in a good offensive staff. We'll see how that goes. But the work can't end right now. I think this is a good start, and you have put yourself in a good place to succeed. But you got to keep that going, because it just doesn't stop with today. Like you got to keep going in February with the combine, with the draft, with free agency. Like there's a whole lot of work left to be done. But I think this is a good start. Obviously, once we officially hear things.
Michael, the work is just beginning. And you know what? I think you tied that into a nice, neat bow. I think we're going to leave it there. That was beautiful. That was well done. I love the analysis there. If you're with us here on YouTube, one more time, hit the thumbs up. That's a great way to support the show. We would really appreciate it. If you're on Apple, if you're on Spotify, leave us a review. We would really appreciate a 5-star review. Follow us. Keep an eye on our Twitter pages as well. If you want to join us live on YouTube, we're trying to do at least once a week here during the season. During the off season, we'll keep an eye out. Obviously, we hope to hear from Ryan Poles and Ben Johnson this week. We'll see what that looks like. We may do another show this week after we hear from them. We'll have to see how the rest of the week plays out. As always, head to shawlocal.com, read all of our Bears coverage over there, shawlocal.com, and please consider subscribing. That's the number one best way to support us. Thank you guys for joining us here live. Thank you, as always, for listening. He's Michael Dwojak. I'm Sean Hammond. This has been the Shaw Local Bears Insider Podcast. Let's have a great week, everybody.